The text arrived on a Tuesday evening, just as the heavy Arizona summer heat finally gave way to the soft glow of dusk. I had just poured myself a glass of iced tea when my phone buzzed. Absent-mindedly, I picked it up. Estate account closed. First, I thought it was a scam text. My thumb hovered over the screen, ready to delete it, but something made me open my banking app. My heart stopped. The account wasn't just numbers on a screen. That account represented my grandparents' estate, the cedar-sided home on Maplewood Lane in Phoenix, where I had spent every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, and countless childhood summers. The house wasn't just property. It was a living memory, a promise, a future. I remembered my grandfather's voice, low and steady, the way he said, "Sophie, you've taken care of us more than anyone else. This house will be yours one day." My grandmother always nodded in agreement, her hand warm as she squeezed mine. And now, with one line of text, it felt like that promise had been erased. My hands trembled so badly that the glass of tea rattled on the table. I called the bank immediately. "Ma'am," the representative said, her tone polite but detached. "The account was closed this morning. Ownership transfer filed by a family member." A family member. The word sliced through me. I didn't even need to ask who. I already knew. Aunt Diane. Growing up, Aunt Diane had always been different. She wasn't warm like Grandma or patient like Grandpa. She was sharp, everything about her was sharp. The pointed heels she clicked across the kitchen tile, the crisp lines of her suits, even her smile, which never seemed to reach her eyes. She liked to remind everyone she was the successful one. She had money. She had an accounting job. She had a sleek condo in Scottsdale. But when it came to compassion, she was bankrupt. When Grandpa's health started failing, Diane showed up late to hospital visits, if she came at all. When Grandma needed rides to dialysis, it wasn't Diane who showed up. It was me. I canceled weekend plans. I sat in those waiting rooms. I made sure Grandma had her favorite butterscotch candies on hand. I was there. Diane wasn't. And yet somehow she always managed to twist conversations until she looked like the devoted daughter, the responsible sister, the one who deserved more. I remembered one Thanksgiving in particular about 3 years before they passed. The house was alive with the smells of roasted turkey, cinnamon pies cooling by the window, and sweet potatoes with marshmallows caramelizing in the oven. The Cardinals game played softly on the living room TV while laughter echoed through the halls. I was in the kitchen mashing potatoes when Grandma leaned close. Her voice was soft, meant only for me. "You have such a good heart, Sophie. This home belongs to you after we're gone. Diane has her own life. But you've been here through it all." At the time, I brushed it off as affection, the way grandparents sometimes say sweet things in the glow of a holiday. But now, replaying that memory against the bank's message on my phone, it hit me like a hammer. That house wasn't just brick and wood. It was my inheritance, my anchor, my legacy. And Diane had stolen it. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying every scene like an old home movie. Grandpa sitting in his recliner reading the morning paper, Grandma humming hymns as she kneaded dough, the porch swing where I studied for exams. Every corner of that house carried a piece of me. By midnight I couldn't stand it anymore. I got in my car and drove. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet only an Arizona suburb knows. Crickets buzzing in the trees, sprinklers hissing across manicured lawns. When I pulled up to the cedar-sided house, my stomach dropped. The porch light was off. The windows were dark. And in the yard, leaning slightly to the side, was a cruel joke of a sign, "Sold." I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Tears blurred my vision, but anger burned hotter than grief. How could she do this? How could she erase decades of love and memory with a single forged signature? In that moment, as the crickets sang and the night pressed in, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't even going to confront her, not yet. No, I was going to fight. And Diane would never see it coming. The next Saturday, I found myself sitting at an Applebee's in Mesa, staring at a basket of untouched mozzarella sticks while my family chattered around me. It was supposed to be a casual get-together. Aunt Diane had organized it, texting everyone with her usual bossy tone. "Family dinner 7 p.m., don't be late." I almost didn't come. Part of me wanted to stay home, curl up under the covers and pretend none of this was happening. But the stronger part needed to see her face. I needed to hear it from her own lips. Diane arrived late, of course. She always did. She swept into the booth wearing a navy blue pantsuit, diamond studs glittering in her ears, as though she were walking into a boardroom instead of a casual chain restaurant. "Well," she announced, sliding into her seat, "I guess you've all heard the news. The house is finally off my hands. Closed the deal this week." She said it like she was bragging about selling stock, not the home where we'd celebrated decades of Christmases. My mother shifted uncomfortably. My father looked down at his menu, silent. Nobody met my eyes. Diane glanced at me, her smile sharp. "Honestly, Sophie, it's for the best. Houses are meant to be sold, not clung to like old teddy bears. You're too young to handle that kind of responsibility anyway." A few cousins chuckled. Someone muttered, "She's right, you know." My throat tightened. Every fiber of my being wanted to slam my hands on the table and scream that she had no right, that Grandpa's promise was real, that she had forged her way into something that wasn't hers. But I didn't. Instead, I took a sip of water, forcing my hand to stay steady. "Sure," I said softly. "If that's how you see it." Diane smirked, clearly satisfied. She thought she'd humiliated me into silence. And maybe for now she had. But inside, a different kind of fire was burning. That night when I got home, I spread every folder, every scrap of paper I owned across my dining table. The surface quickly disappeared under piles of documents, tax forms, medical receipts, and letters written in my grandparents' handwriting. The first thing I found was a stack of hospital bills from Banner University Medical Center, all paid with my debit card. Tens of thousands of dollars I had spent to keep my grandparents comfortable in their last years. Proof that I wasn't just the clingy granddaughter Diane wanted to paint me as. Then, tucked between some Christmas cards, I found it. A letter from my grandfather. The ink was faded, but his steady handwriting was unmistakable. "Sophie, thank you for all you've done for us. When we're gone, the house is yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears spilling down my cheeks. This was it. This was the proof I needed. But I knew a letter alone wouldn't be enough. Diane was cunning. She had a way of twisting facts and making lies sound like truth. I needed more. The next week, I started making quiet visits. At a Starbucks near my school, I met with an old neighbor, Mr. Thompson, who had lived next to my grandparents for 30 years. Over the hiss of espresso machines, he recalled a summer afternoon when Grandpa had told him, "We're leaving the house to Sophie. She's the only one who's been here for us." I scribbled every word into my notebook. Then I called Mrs. Ramirez, the family friend who had driven Grandma to church when I couldn't. She remembered hearing the same promise over coffee in Grandma's kitchen. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Witnesses, receipts, letters. At night, I pored over legal blogs, learning how inheritance cases were fought. I even reached out to a local attorney, Mr. Bennett, who agreed to meet me for a free consultation. Sitting in his office, surrounded by thick law books, I laid out my evidence. He leaned back, tapping a pen against his notepad. "You've got a case," he said finally. "Forgery, misrepresentation, undue influence. It won't be easy, but you have more than most people bring in." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope flicker in my chest. Still, I kept quiet around my family. At Sunday dinner, when Diane bragged about her smart financial moves, I nodded politely, pretending to be small, powerless, defeated. Inside, I was cataloging every smirk, every careless word. When she mocked me for still living in a teacher's apartment, I smiled thinly and passed the mashed potatoes. When she told relatives I was obsessed with a house that never belonged to me, I bit my tongue until it bled, because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't obsessed. I was prepared. And soon the day would come when the balance of power shifted. She thought she'd won. She thought I was beaten. But the truth was, I was just getting started. The summons arrived 2 weeks later, folded neatly in a cream envelope with Maricopa County Superior Court stamped across the front. My breath caught as I opened it. Diane wasn't just brushing me off anymore. She was fighting back, officially. Her lawyer had filed a motion claiming that I was fabricating stories about my grandparents' intentions, that the house had always been Diane's legal right, and that I was simply an embittered niece unwilling to accept reality. I sat on my couch, the words swimming before my eyes. It wasn't just about property anymore. It was about reputation. She was trying to paint me as delusional, greedy, unhinged. The tension reached a boiling point at our annual family barbecue in Tucson. Normally, these gatherings were a time of laughter, loud country music, cousins chasing each other with water balloons while the uncles argued about football. But this year everything was different. Diane strutted in with her lawyer's letter tucked into her handbag like a trophy. She wore oversized sunglasses and carried a tray of store-bought cupcakes, as though the case hanging over our heads was nothing more than gossip. I had barely set the potato salad on the picnic table when she cornered me. "Honestly, Sophie," she said, loud enough for half the backyard to hear, "you should be embarrassed. Dragging family into court over lies. Grandpa would be ashamed." Heat rushed to my face. "Don't you dare speak for him," I snapped. "Oh, sweetie," Diane cooed, her smile laced with venom. "You're just jealous because Mom loved me more. You were always the helper, never the favorite. And now you're clinging to this house like it's going to fix that." A few relatives gasped. Others looked away, uncomfortable. I noticed my parents standing near the grill, their eyes fixed on the sizzling burgers, refusing to intervene. That hurt worse than Diane's words. Their silence screamed louder than any insult. By the end of the barbecue, invisible lines had been drawn. My cousin Megan slipped me a hug and whispered, "Don't give up. I know what Grandpa promised you." But Uncle Greg shook his head when I passed by, muttering, "This whole mess is tearing us apart. Just let it go." For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about me and Diane. The entire family was fracturing, choosing sides in a war I never wanted. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried until my chest hurt. The weight of betrayal pressed down like a stone. But even through the tears, a thought burned clear. If Diane wanted war, she'd get it. Within days, Diane escalated her campaign. She started spreading rumors, whispering to relatives that I was unstable, that teaching elementary school didn't pay enough to support a property anyway, that I was only doing this out of spite. I saw the ripple effects in family group texts. Messages left unread, invitations suddenly drying up, cousins canceling plans. Then came the social media posts, carefully worded but cutting. "Some people will do anything for money, even lie about family." Every post was a dagger. Every whisper felt like poison. I stopped sleeping. Each night I tossed and turned, the ceiling fan whirring above me, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. What if the court believed her? What if all my proof wasn't enough? In the early hours, I'd open my journal, writing page after page. How do you fight your own blood? How do you prove the truth when the liar wears your last name? By dawn, I'd wipe my eyes, splash water on my face, and force a smile for my students. They didn't deserve my brokenness. But behind every cheerful lesson, my heart ached. One afternoon, as I packed up my classroom, the school janitor, Mr. Lewis, paused at the door. He'd known my grandparents from church. "Heard about the mess you're in," he said gently. "Don't let her break you, Sophie. Your grandparents were proud of you. Everyone knew that house was meant for you." The words cracked something open inside me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. Diane, sensing my case was strong, doubled down. She hired a high-powered attorney from Scottsdale, the kind with slicked-back hair and a reputation for burying opponents in paperwork. Every day, more documents arrived at my door. Requests for records, demands for depositions, endless legal jargon designed to exhaust me. But instead of breaking me, it hardened my resolve. At Starbucks, I met again with my lawyer, Mr. Bennett. He flipped through the papers with practiced ease. "Don't panic," he said. "This is intimidation. She's trying to drown you in noise. But remember, noise isn't truth." The final straw came during a phone call late one night. Diane's voice dripped through the line, sweet as honey but laced with malice. "You really think you can win, don't you?" she said. "Here's the thing, Sophie. Even if you get that house, what then? You'll still be the pathetic little teacher with nothing to her name. But me, I'll always be smarter. I'll always be better." I hung up before she could finish. My hands shook, but my spirit didn't. That was the moment the fear crystallized into determination. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for every sacrifice I had made, every promise my grandparents had given me, every silent wound Diane had inflicted. She wanted to crush me. Instead, she had lit a fire. As the court date loomed, my world shrank to a single focus. My apartment walls were lined with binders of evidence. My nights were filled with notes and strategy calls. The conflict had escalated beyond repair. But deep down I knew the louder Diane shouted, the more desperate she was. And I was ready. The morning of the trial dawned gray and heavy, the kind of Arizona sky that threatened monsoon rain but held back just long enough to make you sweat. I stood on the courthouse steps, clutching my binder of evidence, my knees trembling. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and disinfectant. The mahogany benches creaked as relatives and neighbors shuffled in, murmuring behind their hands. It felt like the entire family tree had shown up, some out of loyalty, others for the spectacle. When Aunt Diane swept through the doors, heads turned. She wore a tailored black suit and heels that clicked against the tile, chin tilted high as if she already owned the courtroom. Her attorney, a silver-haired man from Scottsdale with a reputation for ruthlessness, followed close behind. She caught my eye and smirked. The judge, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, called the session to order. Diane's attorney went first. His voice was smooth, confident. This case is simple. My client, Diane Whitaker, was the rightful heir. Miss Sophie Mitchell has fabricated claims out of grief and desperation. There is no valid will naming her. She's clinging to false promises, attempting to tarnish my client's reputation. He spoke as if I were invisible, a nuisance to be brushed aside. Then Mr. Bennett, my lawyer, rose. He wasn't flashy. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "This case isn't about greed. It's about truth. It's about promises kept in life and broken in death. And we intend to prove that Diane Whitaker used deceit and manipulation to steal what was never hers." The clerk wheeled in boxes of files. My heart pounded as Mr. Bennett laid out the receipts. Thousands of dollars in hospital bills paid directly from my account. Miss Mitchell wasn't just a granddaughter, he said. She was caregiver, provider, and protector. Every receipt here shows her sacrifices. Then he produced the letter. The courtroom hushed as the paper was placed on the evidence table. Grandpa's handwriting, faded but clear. "Sophie, thank you for all you've done. When we're gone, the house is yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Gasps rippled through the benches. I saw Cousin Megan clasp her hands to her mouth. Even my parents shifted uncomfortably, shame flickering across their faces. Diane leaned toward her lawyer, whispering furiously. Mr. Thompson, the elderly neighbor, shuffled to the stand, his voice cracked but steady. "Your Honor," he said, "Henry, that's Sophie's granddad, told me straight out one summer afternoon, we're leaving the house to Sophie. She's the only one who's been there for us." Next came Mrs. Ramirez, Grandma's church friend. She nodded firmly. "They told me the same. Diane was never around. Sophie was." Each testimony was another nail in Diane's case. When it was Diane Increable's turn, she painted herself as the victim. Her voice trembled with practiced indignation. "I loved my parents. Sophie's making me out to be a villain. The house was mine legally. Any promises made in casual conversation don't matter. She's twisting their words because she can't let go." Her lawyer piled on. "We must not let emotion cloud fact. There is no sign will naming Sophie. Without it, the law is clear. Property defaults to the next of kin, my client." For a moment, doubt prickled in my chest. He was right about one thing. There was no official will. But then Mr. Bennett stood again. "Your Honor," he said, "we've uncovered additional evidence." He displayed bank statements showing a large transfer from the estate account to Diane's personal account just days after my grandmother's funeral. The money had been used to purchase a brand new BMW. The judge's eyes narrowed. Murmurs erupted in the gallery. Mr. Bennett pressed on. Not only did Diane take property never promised to her, she exploited grief to enrich herself. That's not inheritance. That's theft. Diane's composure cracked. She fidgeted, her face flushing red. Finally, it was my turn. I sat in the witness chair, palms sweating. Diane's lawyer tried to dismantle me. "Miss Mitchell," he said smoothly, "isn't it true you're just a schoolteacher with limited income? Wouldn't it be difficult for you to maintain such a large property?" I swallowed hard, then answered, "Yes, it would have been difficult. But my grandparents knew my heart. They knew I wasn't after money. I was after family. That house wasn't about wealth. It was about legacy. For the first time my voice didn't shake. Mr. Bennett called Diane back to the stand. He slid Grandpa's letter toward her. "Is this your father's handwriting?" Diane hesitated. "Yes." "And do you deny that he wrote this?" Her lips parted but no sound came. She looked around the courtroom at the relatives, at the judge, at me. For once the sharpness drained from her smile. The silence was deafening. Finally the judge banged her gavel. "Based on the evidence presented, the financial records, the testimony of multiple witnesses, and the letter from the deceased, this court finds that the property rightfully belongs to Sophie Mitchell. Furthermore, we find that Diane Whitaker acted in bad faith and engaged in fraudulent behavior. Restitution will be ordered." The words echoed like a hymn. Around me family members whispered. Some looked relieved. Others looked at Diane with thinly veiled disgust. Diane herself sat frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. And I, for the first time in months, breathed. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I simply turned my eyes toward Diane and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "I told you silence can be the loudest revenge." The gavel's echo still rang in my ears as I stepped out of the courthouse. The air smelled different, crisp, almost clean, though maybe that was just the weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in months I felt taller, as though I'd been hunched under Diane's shadow and finally stood upright. Behind me relatives filed out in silence. Some avoided my gaze. Others, like Cousin Megan, squeezed my arm and whispered, "You did it. I'm proud of you." But the person I searched for, my father, only offered a tight nod before turning away. My mother trailed behind him, eyes downcast. Their silence was its own verdict. They weren't happy I dragged family into court, even if I was right. Victory, it turned out, was lonelier than I imagined. 2 weeks later, I unlocked the door to the cedar-sided house for the first time since the trial. Dust hung in the air, but the scent of cedar and faint traces of Grandma's cinnamon still lingered. I stood in the foyer, my hand brushing the banister I had slid down as a child, and for a moment I could almost hear Grandpa's laugh echoing through the halls. The house was mine now, officially. The deed had my name. The court had ruled. But as I wandered room to room, the victory felt hollow. The dining table where we once carved turkey and passed bowls of mashed potatoes sat empty, a ghost of laughter hanging above it. The living room, once filled with cousins sprawled on the carpet, now held only silence. Winning hadn't brought the family back together. It had split us further apart. That Thanksgiving I cooked dinner alone. I set out the china Grandma had treasured, roasted turkey just the way she taught me, mashed potatoes with too much butter because that was Grandpa's guilty pleasure. As I ate at the long wooden table, a single place set for one, I realized justice comes with a cost. I had the house, the legacy, the proof that I wasn't weak. But I had lost the illusion that family always stands by you. Still, as I looked around, I knew I'd made the right choice. To let Diane win would have meant erasing everything my grandparents stood for. Later that night, I lit a candle on the mantel and whispered into the stillness. I kept my promise. I didn't let anyone take it from me. The flame flickered, and for a moment it felt like they were there, watching, approving. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. I simply sat in the silence, letting it wash over me. Because silence, I realized, was my greatest revenge. Not the courtroom victory, not the restitution, not the whispers in the family group chat. It was the quiet knowledge that Diane had lost everything she craved. Control, power, reputation, and me. I had gained something far greater than a house. I had reclaimed my voice. 2 years passed. Seasons turned, holidays came and went, and the cedar-sided house on Maplewood Lane in Phoenix slowly became mine in more than just paperwork. I repainted the shutters, planted roses by the porch, and restored the creaking swing where I once studied for exams. Neighbors stopped by sometimes, Mr. Thompson with his slow smile, Mrs. Ramirez with her banana bread. They always said the same thing. Your grandparents would be proud. But the family, most of them drifted away. Diane never spoke to me again. Rumor had it she sold her condo in Scottsdale to cover debts after the restitution order. Some relatives still sided with her, convinced I'd torn the family apart. Others stayed neutral, too afraid to choose. And yet, I didn't regret a thing. I'd learned a truth most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Sometimes strangers hold your heart more gently than family ever could. On the second anniversary of the court ruling, I hosted a small gathering at the house. Not a Thanksgiving feast with 20 relatives, just a handful of friends, co-workers, and neighbors. People who had stood by me. People who showed up when it mattered. We sat around the dining table where so many battles had been fought, laughter echoing against the old wooden beams. For the first time, the house didn't feel haunted by absence. It felt alive again. Later that night, as I blew out the candles, I thought of my grandparents. I kept it safe, I whispered into the quiet. And I learned the hardest lesson you never wanted me to face. Silence isn't weakness. It's power. And sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. The house settled around me, creaking in approval. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. If this story hit you the way it hit me, don't let it fade when the video ends. Family betrayal cuts deep. But stories like this remind us that justice and strength can rise even from the darkest wounds. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted most? Subscribe now so you won't miss the next story of silence, revenge, and shocking family secrets. And turn on the bell, because every week we bring you a new chapter where betrayal meets payback. Remember, sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.